It's a topic I'm fond of.
Well, I'm so deeply fascinated now, not just because I went through it and how much it meant to me to learn the things I've learned, but it's just really fascinating and how much I took my voice for granted. Like it just always worked for me.
Yep.
And now I realize how delicate it is. And, clearing your throat can be a violent activity for your vocal cords. Like even the simplest things.
Yeah, yeah. And yet it's delicate and yet robust, which was one of the things that I love so much about the voice is that mostly it serves us very well. And unless something freaky happens to it, it serves us up until the very end. A lot of our joints and our muscles give out and stuff like that, but that larynx keeps working because it's involved in these very life preserving activities. It's not just producing phonation, but the whole swallowing thing and protecting the airway thing, which is so important.
Right.
So, people can phonate until their last dying breath.
Yeah.
And that's amazing that it does continue to work so well and how robust it is and how, most people can go to sporting events and scream, or they can clear their throat. And we have people who are chronic coughers for like 30 years and they come in, I've been coughing for 30 years. And we look at their vocal folds and they go, they look fine. That doesn't mean they don't have a cough that we have to cure. I mean, obviously we have to help them with their problem, but it's amazing how for some people, they can cough for 30 years and not show it.
Right. Right.
And other people, not so much. It's
Mhm.
it's a very unique individual little organism, just like everything else.
Right.
I will also ask you, have you read John Colapinto's book?
You mentioned it to me, so I got it.
I did. Okay.
Yeah, and I have, and it was really helpful to me, most of all in the beginning, just because everything he described, he had a different voice issue than I did, but
Mm.
everything he described about how it felt to him to experience it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I feel seen."
That's one of the reasons I wanted you to read it, because how universal that sense of loss, that loss of self
Mhm.
is with any kind of voice disorder. And it doesn't matter. His is like the polar opposite of yours.
Right.
And sometimes, well, he often confuses speech with voice, which people do all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a very common thing. Is people say, I have a voice problem. And we go, no, you have a speech problem.
Clarifying that, well, you tell me, what's one and what's the other?
Voice is really just the sound that you're making. Speech is the words and how you create those vowels and consonants that form the words. People often don't even think of like speech and language therapy, because so voice is one component of speech. Phonation is the sound, and then all of the things, the articulation that forms the vowels and consonants that form the words that we understand is a whole other process. And then language is a whole other process itself. So that's a whole other thing.
Right. Right. Fascinating. Okay, well, I would love to go backwards and then just have you tell me why you got into this, what pulled you to this as a profession. Let's start with that first.
I was a singer, like all my life. I was a singer and a musician. My undergrad degree was in actually music education, although I did all of the requirements for a vocal performance degree. And I just assumed I was going to be a singer and a musician all my life and make my money as a high school choir director to start out with. So I got a degree in secondary choral. And after undergrad, I started having voice problems. And that was the mid 70s. And there was no one around to help. The field of voice was very, very new. Field of voice science at that time. So I had never heard of a speech language pathologist, and there were none of those around to help me. There were no voice clinics anywhere. And it's interesting, back in those days, there were a few forward-thinking vocal pedagogues who believed that if you understood your instrument, you could maybe make better decisions about it. But the majority of voice teachers felt that if you knew too much about your instrument, you would not be able to sing artistically. You would be singing mechanistically because you would be thinking about your muscles and your ligaments and your joints while you were singing instead of thinking about the Mozart phrase, which has been well debunked by now. There are lots of really, really good world-class singers who know all about their instrument. And I'm here to tell you, if I'm singing Mozart, I'm thinking about the musical line and my character and the lyrics and all that kind of thing. I'm not thinking about my cricothyroid muscle. That's for the studio. And I think a lot of teachers were just afraid of the physics and the math of it all, or the anatomy and physiology. You just didn't want to know about that. So they made up this story about you can't know about your voice. So I came out of my undergrad, even having had a vocal pedagogy class, not ever having heard the words like thyroid cartilage or thyroretinoid muscle. So there was so much anatomical misinformation and lack of information that led me into my voice problems. If somebody had told me more about the truth of my instrument, I wouldn't have been trying so hard to turn what is a soubrette soprano. So if you know the opera world, the soubrette sopranos are the Inas, Despina, and Serlina, and they're the young maid. They're the little coquettes. Right? So I'm not the big Wagnerian lyric soprano or dramatic soprano. I've got this little light, high voice. And I wanted to be a dramatic mezzo. I wanted to be Carmen. So I pushed my voice, and my teacher would say, well, don't push. And I go, you want my voice to grow. But she didn't really tell me why that wasn't okay or what I was doing. So by the time I was 2 years out of college, I was really struggling with my upper pitch range. I'd be cracking and splattering all over the place and not understanding it. She didn't understand it. The teacher didn't understand it. So there was this long journey of figuring out what was the matter. I went to an ENT physician who was very condescending, very not helpful. Although basically right, basically what he told me was you're a neurotic soprano with bad technique. And, 5 years later, I figured out I'm a neurotic soprano with bad technique. But he also said things like your vocal cords are loaded. And I still don't know what vocal cords are loaded means. And that wasn't helpful. He sent me to an allergist. Maybe that was helpful. Anyway, so it was this long journey of teachers and workshops and trying to discover something about my own voice and find somebody who can help me and find some sort of more modern pedagogy. But in the meantime, I had times where I blew a performance in front of a large audience, and it is devastating to a singer. And so I did go to that very dark place of, first of all, if I'm not a singer, who am I? That's a really common theme. And believe it or not, another common theme that you would never get to hear, but I get to hear all the time is if I can't sing, I not only don't deserve to sing, but I'm not sure that I deserve to live. So it's interesting. We should be talking about that because I was just telling this story to somebody else recently, having been around this sort of round table of a bunch of voice specialists, voice scientists like me, who came from that singing background, most of whom had had voice problems. And we were all sort of telling our stories. And when I said, I went to that dark place, and a whole bunch of people around the table went, yeah, mm-hmm. They knew that dark place, that place of shame, of humiliation. And I happened to be married to somebody at the time who was very unhelpful, pretended to be supportive, but He said things like, once he said to me, when you cracked on that high A, you ruined the concert for everyone in the choir and everyone in the audience. I like to say I'm not married to him anymore. So, yeah. Right. But that does tell you that for everybody, their voice is really an important part of their self-identity. For the professional voice user, and especially the singer, it's so deeply embedded in who you are and what you are and your value as a human being that having a voice problem really pulls the rug out from under you. And it could be just devastating.
Yeah.
At that time, there had been a number of years of what was then known as the Juilliard Symposia at the Juilliard School in New York about what they called the use and care of the professional voice. And all of these voice professional scientists and ENT physicians and a few speech language pathologists would come together and talk about voice research and stuff like that. And we had the Minnesota knockoff of that, the first interdisciplinary colloquium on the use and care of the human voice at the university in 1981. And I went to that and was introduced to the world of speech language pathology, that could, a speech pathologist who could actually help somebody with a voice disorder. And it was jaw dropping.
Yeah.
And the fact of someone to help me was jaw dropping.
Wow.
And that's kind of when I made that pivot. By that time, I was actually singing. No, I was still struggling a lot. And I was still performing. So there's that imposter complex too, or imposter syndrome too, because I was teaching full time. That was my job. I was a voice teacher, choir director,
Yeah.
and singer. And I was getting money to go out on stage and sing, and didn't know all the time what was going to come out of my mouth. And I was choosing my repertoire very carefully so I wouldn't get into trouble, and always afraid that I was going to be found out. And so I was talking with somebody about what my career path should be. And it was clear to me is, why would I get a master's in voice when, what you do for a master's in voice is you have 2 years of classes and study. And I was still taking lessons, and I was still going to every workshop I could. And then you give a bunch of recitals. Well, I was giving a recital every year anyway. And I wanted to help people with their voice because I wanted to help me with my voice. So I became a speech language pathologist and then did the PhD in voice science.
Yeah.
Certainly at that point, it was a pretty small group. There were maybe 10 of us in the country.
Yeah. Wow.
By now, it's a much, much bigger group. That whole field has just exploded. In the early 80s, the voice field absolutely exploded. And there were a whole bunch of me, wow, out there. Ex-singer, well, people who still sing, but then who got really into this sort of science, medical, rehabilitative aspect of it.
Very fascinating. I think the fact that you came into it having experienced the dysfunction yourself and the devastation of that makes you really compassionate about care you're giving to other people. And gosh, that's amazing. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that has been an important aspect of my clinical career, is that I had that automatic compassion, that automatic understanding, also that automatic hope.
Mm-hmm.
Because I found hope, I figured it out, I got better,
Mm-hmm.
I can sing now. And then continued to, as I went through certain periods of my life, sort of walk a different walk with my patients, like the post-menopause
Yeah.
voice. Okay, been there,
Yeah.
done that now.
Yeah.
Had to rehabilitate that.
Yeah.
So I've managed to injure myself a couple of times since then. I'm just kind of prone to injury.
Wow. Well, and I understand, they do the depression screening stuff when you do your pre-check-in every time for your appointment. And that's no joke, like I'm not personally prone to that. I'm not immune to it either, but at that I was headed down. The train was on the tracks on a steep downhill, no brakes. And when I got into lion's voice. And I know what, so I can only imagine that if my entire profession, depended on me being able to sing on stage, that would amplify my sense of bewilderment and its identity and worth. So,
Yeah. Yes. Identity and worth. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. And I've seen that over and over and over again
yeah,
in my patients.
yeah. Wow.
But how important it is to have hope, how empowering it is to have something that you can do about it.
hmm And for me, it was two things. It was being listened to, because in my first ENT experience, I just got orders, not information, and not even many questions. And I mean, my appointments were, if he was in the room for 10 minutes, I doubt it. I didn't learn anything. So I was empowered. I was given hope, kind of similar to what you said. I wasn't any better when I walked out of the Lion's Voice clinic, and I didn't have any sooner expectation of when my voice was going to come back, but I knew a lot about how my voice was working and how it wasn't working. And I knew medical professionals had heard all of my stuff. So nothing was missing from the story that might help me figure it out. That gave me, that made me, that bounced me right back up. Not right back up, but, to a place I could be with it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And people, and we are tertiary care.
Yeah.
So people have been a few places
Yeah.
before they get to us. And it's finally like, okay, I'm home now.
Right.
Someone gets me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you've been there since like the beginning, right?
Formed the Lion's Voice Clinic. Absolutely. Yeah. I started in otolaryngology in 1992. I was coming off my clinical fellowship year, which is what a speech language pathologist has to do. It's a 3-year course of study, and then you do this clinical fellowship year. And I was finishing that, but I was also in my PhD program at the time, and I knew that I did not want to work in the rehab part of the hospital, but I had already established a relationship with Dr. Gotti, the otolaryngologist there who was interested in voice. And I had asked him if I could shadow him for a while. And then I got involved in a research project that he was doing. And in my clinical fellowship year, I was taking the voice patients. So I was in the rehab department, but he would send the voice patients to me. And then I said, so why don't I just come to work for you in otolaryngology? And oh, by the way, you can have me for free. Just give me a room and a tape recorder and a video camera and a keyboard, and you don't have to pay me.
Wow.
I would love to tell beginning students this story. Is that I just created my own job.
hmm
Um, I did a lot of volunteer work. I worked really, really hard.
Wow.
But by the time it came time to hit them up for money, I was indispensable. And in fact, he and I were opening up. He had one morning of clinic per week.
hmm
And by the time I had been there a year and a half, we had to double the time because the singers started to know about us,
Right.
and we were getting all the singers. But I had been a singing teacher for 10 years in this town
Yeah.
by the time I was there. So I just, wrote to my pals at the university and other colleges and stuff like that and said, guess what? I'm here now. I can do voice therapy now. So, and it was automatic. And then it was a couple years later that we wrote a grant to the Lions. The Lions, you may know, are interested in eyes and ears. They're interested in communication, and they already had a relationship with the department having to do with ears. And we said, well, if you're interested in receptive communication, how about being interested in expressive communication? So we wrote a grant for a bunch of equipment, our very first stroboscope. And they said, okay. And they gave us the grant, and we named it the Lions Voice Clinic, and the rest is history.
That's so great. It's such a great name, even if, I didn't necessarily know it was Lions as in the organization, So the lions roar, you think about, and that's a powerful sound. And then that's the name of a Buddhist magazine, Lions Roar. Yeah. That's just super cool.
People are astounded, like, because all of my PowerPoint presentations, and I give a gazillion all over the world, and it says Lions Voice Clinic, and people come up and you mean like the lions, the lion? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like the lions, like pancake breakfasts and all that. Adopt a Highway, those lions,
Yeah. And they've continued to support the clinic all these years.
all these years. Yep.
Wow. Wow. So I noticed you have a lot of journal articles published. So in addition to all these PowerPoint speeches you give, you've published a lot. And I just am curious about how it feels to, some people are either or. They're a academician and they're writing the papers, or they're a clinician and they're practicing, or they're a singer and they're singing and they're teaching singing. And you've done all three, do all three.
Aren't I lucky?
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
It must be a juggle, and also it must be such a huge benefit in the insights you can cross-pollinate between them.
For sure, that's the benefit of it, is to have my feet, all 3 feet in those 3 different worlds. Yeah, I think that's been the important thing, and I realized very quickly that the most important thing, that sort of my life's mission, would be to be able to make voice science accessible to singers and singing teachers and lay people, especially people who are like afraid of science, um, especially like the physics of singing. Singing teachers are terrified of the physics of singing. They're terrified of physics. And I'm somebody who didn't do, let's see, I did 10th grade geometry. I didn't take a high school algebra class. I didn't go beyond 10th grade biology. I didn't want to do any math and science. I was an artist. I didn't want to do that. And so I had to be completely self-taught in like algebra, because I had 6 doctoral level statistics courses.
Oh, wow.
And I was self-taught in algebra and self-taught in physics.
Wow.
So, and so my mission was to make it accessible, make it fun, make it relevant, make it not scary for people who are afraid of that. Because the more you understand, the better you teach, the better you sing, or at least not necessarily the better you sing, but the more you don't get yourself into trouble. Certainly the better you teach, the more tools you have in your toolbox when you understand the voice more. So that's been my thing. So as an academician, I have a real fascination with how voice is perceived and how can we measure the perception of voice or the quality of the voice. How do you measure vocal beauty? How do you put some sort of objective measure on brightness or warmth? So, how do you do that?
Right.
So I'm really interested in that. And I wish that I had done more research and more publishing in that area, but I couldn't do it all.
Yeah.
So I sort of view myself as a gross underachiever. But the important things to me were those articles that I wrote for the Journal of Singing on dispelling the vocal myths.
Yeah.
To say, there's a lot of vocal propaganda that we're putting out as voice teachers, and it's not helpful.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that from the vantage point of the clinic. I see the problems that singers walk in with, and some of it is because of misinformed teaching.
Yeah. Wow.
And then the other thing that I'm proud of is the whole line of research that dispelled the myth that singing teachers can actually perceive intonation correctly. You probably read that.
A little bit. Yeah.
That's been a really provocative one.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. And that's so subjective. It's actually completely, and there's no measure.
you can measure accuracy of singing. You absolutely can measure accurate.
Of pitch, meaning.
Yes, the accuracy of pitch. You can absolutely measure the accuracy of pitch. But when a singing teacher says that voice is not in tune and that voice is in tune, doesn't have much to do with the actual accuracy of the voice.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, that's been a fun bunch of research because I like to shake those ivory towers.
That's great. That's so great.
And if I can add one more thing, that whole thing of vocal self identity, which you've discovered, is huge. That voice it's like our face. It's who we are. It's part of our self identity. It is huge. So that for the transgender community, getting a voice to match the
Mhm.
new body is huge. It's difficult. It's scary because it's like now it's, it's an unknown creature and yet so
Right.
important.
Right.
And those are people who I really think of who have such a struggle.
Yeah.
That's a population that you might not think about, but where that vocal self identity is this huge issue. We call it gender affirming voice care. And of course, they have a hard time getting care.
Yeah. Yeah. And where are you in terms of shifting to retirement? What's your trajectory and what are you up to?
So this summer, at the end of July, I reduced my hours a little bit and I went to an all virtual thing. So that's the biggest thing is going all virtual and I'll find out how that is. I've got 4 presentations between now and October
Mhm.
3rd. So that's still my life. But
Yeah.
I'm getting tired.
Yeah.
So but the Lions Voice Clinic is my baby, right?
Exactly. I mean, you wrote the grant proposal. You birthed it.
Named it,
Yeah.
it made it famous. It was well known before we hired any of our next people. Although I'm handing off the baton to marvelous, marvelous colleagues. We've attracted and hired just the very best. I'm I'm proud.
Oh, I can imagine.
And right now I will say that that's sort of the other things, the other part of my professional life that like being very involved at a sort of organizational level in international voice organizations is very satisfying. So moving to sort of bigger picture kinds of things and um less of the just see patients and write reports, that's exciting to me.
Yeah. And what an impact. I just see your work as being so impactful. So that's got to be something that you feel good about. Talk about self-worth. You got to go to sleep at night thinking, well, I did a few things right today, you know? I mean, I would feel so proud of that if I were you.
Thank you for saying that because yeah, like I said, I do have a lot of sense of being a gross underachiever and a lot of imposter syndrome. I have a lot of that.
Well, and it's so refreshing to hear you say, you who I would consider so accomplished, and to hear you say, no, I've got imposter syndrome. That always heartens those of us who also have that feeling.
Such a thing.
Such a thing, especially for women.
Yeah. But there are certain things that I am proud of. And the Lions Voice Clinic is definitely one of them. Our philosophy is something that I'm proud of. We think that true interdisciplinary model where we are partners.
Yeah.
I'm not a speech language pathologist who works for an MD. I'm one who works with an MD. We think that model is really important. So
Mhm.
always speech language pathologist and otolaryngologist together in the same room, delivering an evaluation and treatment plan together. We think that's number one, the gold standard, and number two, so much of the power of it is that you can watch the MD and the SLP, thinking out loud together
Right.
and deciding things. And so,
Mhm. Wow, that's great. And having experienced that as a patient, I experienced just what you're talking about. I had the room full of people, the MD, and sometimes 3 speech language pathologists, one that's swallow disorder and one that's the voice. And yeah. So that gave me such confidence. I was in good hands, which then gave me great relief.
yeah, so I'm proud of that. And so I think I will be able to let go
It's possible.
So I'll leave you with that.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'll be eager to hear more. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you. Really great to talk to you. Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
All right. See you later. Bye.